What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Madden 07 Albuquerque Vipers franchise. Today, we're going to be recapping Season 12, the 2017 regular season. Starting with our schedule, we started off 4-0, 3 straight wins to open up our season there, a bye week before we beat down on the Titans. We were looking real good in our title defense, but then the Cowboys destroyed us by 20 points in Week 6. They ended up going 11-5 and making the playoffs, so not the worst loss in the world there. It was to a good team. They gave us our first loss of the season. Then we bounced back against a bad Cardinals team by 31 points before we dropped 3 straight games there, losing by over 40 points in 2 of them. Our defense was playing awful. We were 5-4 at this point of the season, and things weren't looking great. Then we got a huge win against the Seahawks, who were looking to knock us off and try to take our division. Then we got a big win against the Saints, who at the time were one of the NFC's best. Then we beat the Packers, who also at the time were one of the NFC's best. Then we went out and beat the Cardinals again, beat the Redskins on Monday Night Football. They would end up missing the playoffs by a game there. Then we beat the 49ers, got some revenge on them, and wrapped up our season with a great win against a super team in the Colts. And since we were able to end our season on a 7-game winning streak, despite being on the lower side of the standings at midseason, we finished with the top seed in the NFC after the Bears choked it at the end of the season. They get the 2 seed. You got the Falcons, Cowboys, Packers, and Saints. Well, we're going to go through all the standings here, starting in the AFC North. The Browns going 12-4, the only team there with a winning record, as the Bengals have one of the worst in the entire league. In the South, it was incredibly competitive between the Texans and the Colts, like it has been for the last 3 or so years now, with the Texans getting the better of them, going 14-2. The Titans, they went 8-8. The Jags 5-11. In the AFC East, the Jets win it by 3, 13-3 is their record. The Bills go 10-6 and get themselves a playoff spot. The Dolphins just missed out on some postseason action at 9-7, and the Patriots are the bottom of the barrel here. You'll love to see it. In the AFC West, the Chiefs win it with an 8-8 record. They get the tiebreaker over the Denver Broncos. The Chargers with Eli Manning only go 7-9. They had much higher expectations going into the season, and then the Raiders went 5-11. In the AFC North, it was tight between the Packers and the Bears, but Chicago would end up pulling away at the end of the year. Green Bay goes 11-5, the Lions 7-9, and the Vikings, like we saw in the last video, got their win in the final game of the season. I mean, look how bad they were. 186 points scored, 471 against. They might be worse than the 2006 Vipers. Maybe not quite that bad, but I think they've got to be the worst team that we have seen since those 2006 Vipers. In the NFC South, you got the Falcons and the Saints. It was tight, but Atlanta managed to pull away at the end of the year, and I think they are the better of the 2 teams. Meanwhile, the Bucs and Panthers, not too great. In the East, you have the Cowboys, who have not been good for a majority of this series, so good for them. They got themselves a division title there. The Redskins and Giants both go 9-7 and miss out, and the Eagles 8-8, so a pretty tight division here in the East. Finally, in the West, we were the only team with a winning record. At one point, the Seahawks and Cardinals were trying to fight their way into the division race here, but they ultimately just kind of fell off at the end of the year, and the Niners were just never good this season. Looking at the league leaders in stats, Orlando Cross had the best quarterback rating, and it wasn't even close over guys like Alex Malone, Phillip Rivers, Matt Leinart, and Aaron Rodgers. When it comes to passing yards, guess what? Also Orlando Cross by over 600 yards above Parrish Walker, who was second. He was balling out this entire season. 41 touchdowns and 9 more than Alex Malone and Aaron Rodgers. He also had less interceptions than both those guys, only throwing 11. Matt Leinart only threw 7, which was the least amount for starting quarterbacks. Phillip Rivers had 8 interceptions to his 27 touchdowns. Most picks goes to Kyle Cates of the Patriots, and that's why they were so bad this season. When it comes to running the football, 2,200 yards for Jason Crawford and 18 touchdowns. No wonder the Texans were so overpowered this season. The Lions had a running back over 2,000 yards this year as well. Curtis Maddox, 1,700 yards for the Titans. Tracy Smelly had a great season. He's going to be out for the playoffs though, and our former running back Blake Flowers had a spectacular year with the Jets. Byron Dorsey, a Buffalo Bills tight end, one of 2 players to have over 100 catches, the other being Ed Klein of the Carolina Panthers, another tight end there. Neither of them were able to get to the 1,000-yard mark, though. The top receiver went to Hakeem Morton of the Baltimore Ravens, a catch shy of 100 there, 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns for him. Then you got Fulton, John Wade, Jamar Young, and Jason Ford for the top receiving numbers there. When it comes to receiving touchdowns, Chad Jackson, 14, tied with Jamar Young, who had a great season for those Indianapolis Colts. Our very own Jimmy Andrews, 13 touchdowns there, Morton with 12. Defensively, Allen Cannon led the league in tackles, and it wasn't really even close, so at least the Vikings had that going for them. When it comes to TFLs, Quamey Holt with 11, above Willie Delgado, Daryl Fannin. Look at this, just covered with Albuquerque Vipers. When it comes to sacks, Jesse Baker, who spent 3 seasons with us, 3 pretty disappointing seasons though, has a huge bounce back campaign with the Texans, 18 sacks, just another member of that overpowered team. And when it comes to interceptions, Darren Gordon with 9. He also missed some time this year, so that is insane that he was able to get so many. Looking at our team specific stats, now we already saw a lot of Orlando Cross's numbers, completing 62% of his passes. He was sacked 28 times this season, and when he was out, Dejon Beasley played well, 344 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have those 2 interceptions, only completing 57% of his passes, but I still think he's one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. Running the ball was a little bit disappointing. I thought we maybe found something in Ryan Franks, and maybe we did, but he was very hot and cold this season, finishing with 772 yards, 8 touchdowns, averaging 4.1 yards per carry. You got Elvis Watts with over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, Cross with almost 200 yards and a touchdown. Matthews didn't do a whole lot running the football though, neither did a lot of these other guys. Jimmy Andrews was our top receiver, and he had a breakout year, almost 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns, almost 20 yards per reception. Larry Fitzgerald and Charles Phillips, they both took a little bit of a step back this season. Unfortunately, it seems his age is catching up to both of them, as they are both 33 years old right now, even though Fitzgerald has been in the league a whole lot longer. Von Lewis had a great year, 500 yards and 2 touchdowns for him. Jamarcus Ward over 500 yards and 8 touchdowns. Ryan Franks made an impact in the receiving game as well. Trey Francis had a good year as our number 2 tight end. The UDFA, Jonathan Colton, only had 8 catches, but a lot of the time it came on 3rd down, so he had some nice hands there. You got Ron White, he had himself a touchdown reception, over 100 receiving yards, not bad at all for a fullback. Our offensive line played pretty good this season, over 100 pancakes for Joey Hand, and we did give up a ton of sacks for each one of these guys here. Defensively, Maurice Sanders led us in tackles, Quamey Holt behind him there by 7. Of course, he's going to lead us in TFLs as we got a good chunk of those this season. Daryl Fannin had 16 sacks, a great year for him, especially coming off of a 17 sack season now. Leland Hahn, the rookie defensive tackle, had 3 sacks when he had to check into the game, which is nice to see. And then interceptions wise, we got a bunch of them. 9 for Darren Gordon, 4 for John Kelly, 3 for Maurice Sanders, 2 for James and Williams and Hampton, 1 for Quamey Holt and Javon Anthony and Vince Mitchell. And then when it came to kicking, Brian Koch, of course, was great. He had never missed a field goal as a Viper before the season, though, where he did end up missing 3. One of them was a 64-yard attempt, though, that bounced off of the upright last week against the Colts. He hit both of his game-winning field goal attempts and every extra point. 41-year-old Brian Moorman was a good punter for us. He had 1,500 yards, as you see there. Only 34 punts this season. And when it comes to kick returns, Harold White with 3 kick return touchdowns. I think we found our guy to do all of our return duties. Not much to talk about with punt returns, though. And for a 3rd straight season now, Orlando Cross is your MVP, becoming the first player since Brett Favre to win 3 straight MVPs, just the 2nd to ever do it, and this is his 5th MVP overall. He's got to be going down as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He finishes ahead of Jason Crawford, who of course had a phenomenal season, Blake Flowers 2nd in voting, then you got Alex Malone and Phillip Rivers. Jason Crawford does take the Offensive Player of the Year award. Darius Franklin, linebacker for the Jets, gets Defensive Player of the Year. Jamar Young gets a much-deserved Offensive Rookie of the Year, being the top receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. And the Jaguars, Jimmy Sanford wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. Cross wins the Best Quarterback Award. Best Running Back Award, of course, goes to Jason Crawford. Best Receiver, Jamar Young as a rookie. This guy is going to have a fantastic career. I can feel it. Best Offensive Lineman, a bunch of Vipers and Texans up here. Best Defensive Lineman goes to Daryl Fannin. You know what? All 16 sacks that he got this season. Darius Franklin, not only does he win Defensive Player of the Year, but also Best Linebacker. Checks out there. You got Al Lucas winning the Best DB Award of the Bears. And even though he missed 3 kicks, Brian Koch is your best kicker. Coach of the Year is going to go to the Jets. They went 13-3. Gary Kubiak finishes 2nd in voting. Then you got Ron Rivera. You got the Cowboys head coach there, Haggins, and Brian Billick finishes in 5th. Looking at Vipers in the Pro Bowl, of course, Orlando Cross is going to be the #1 quarterback. Fullback Ron White's going to be making his 3rd Pro Bowl of his career. Jimmy Andrews is going to be making it to the Pro Bowl for the first time. You love to see it. And we've also got several linemen making it, our right tackle and our left tackle there. Joseph Santiago at guard, as well as Derek Flanagan. Pretty much everyone on the offensive line, outside of Chris Diamond for some reason, made the Pro Bowl. Of course, Daryl Fannin makes it on the defensive side of the ball, along with Darren Gordon and Maurice Sanders. We got ourselves a first-round bye, so looking at the games in wildcard weekend, the Buffalo Bills get knocked off by the Cleveland Browns here, 28-12. Nothing crazy here though. Cleveland was expected to win, 3 touchdowns from Parrish Walker, John Murphy with 94 rushing yards there as the Browns advance. We had a divisional battle here between the Saints and the Falcons. Atlanta would end up winning 17-13 despite 3 John Owens interceptions. The Saints unable to capitalize on all that, and the Falcons will be moving on to the next round. And even though the Chiefs were the home team, they were definitely not the favorites here, but after taking a 21-point lead on the Colts, they held on to it. Indianapolis tried a second half comeback, unable to do so. This is a huge upset here. The Colts, one of the best teams in the league, don't even win a playoff game. And of course, an old rivalry here, Packers-Cowboys. Green Bay takes it by 1, 21-20. Big Ben and the Packers defeat Lance Black and the Dallas Cowboys by just a single point there as they advance to the next round. And that's who our opponents are going to be. The Packers versus Vipers rivalry continues to grow. That's going to be it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, leave it a like, of course, it's always appreciated. And until next time, this has been Jeffrey.